Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan from stepbysteppainting.net, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint a fun scarecrow at night with acrylics on an 11 by 14 inch canvas. So I'm going to go over the brushes and colors that we use for this. This is a 3/4 inch flat wash brush, a number 4 round brush, and a 3/8 inch angle brush. These are Princeton Velvet Touch brushes. And Liquitex Basics colors, we have Phthalo Blue, Raw Sienna, Brilliant Yellow Green, Cad Red Medium Hue, Cad Yellow Medium Hue, Mars Black, Raw Umber, Titanium White, Hooker's Green Hue, and Light Blue Permanent. Feel free to use whatever colors you have available, whatever brand you have available. This painting has a lot of colors in it. And I used a white chalk pencil for drawing the scarecrow. We are going to go ahead and get started with a blank canvas. Again, I'm working on an 11 by 14, but this design can work on any size canvas and any kind of surface. And I'm going to start by loading my 3/4 flat brush in the water, kind of tap it dry. But I'm not going to dry it all the way. I'm going to use some of that water left on the brush and load that into titanium white. I'm going to start in the upper right corner area and I'm going to paint a white circle. This background is a blended background and it's all going around this moon. And I'm going to paint a fairly large circle because I'm going to use this white to help blend this blue in my next step. So a circle that's about 6 inches in diameter, about maybe 5 to 6 inches. Doesn't have to be exact, but I'm kind of dragging this white outwards because I want to use that white to blend my blue. So without rinsing the brush, I'm going to grab a little bit of this Phthalo Blue. So Phthalo Blue is a very strong blue color, and we're only going to introduce a little bit at a time here. So I even kind of blended that in with the white on my palette so it would be a very light blue. So I'm going to keep painting in circles, blending that. I'm going to try my best to keep that center part very bright. If you lose the bright white in the center, that's okay because when this dries, we can always go back and just paint a white circle right there. When you're blending backgrounds like this, it's important to keep in mind not to overblend your colors. That way, everything doesn't end up turning the same color throughout. And I'm going to work my way out and I'm going to gradually add more dark blue into this. Keeping in mind that this Phthalo Blue is a very strong and dark color, so I'm going to only introduce a little bit at a time, but then I'm going to make sure that I still grab white on my brush to help let that blend. And then some more blue in this corner area. Can start introducing more of a solid blue at this point. So I'm going to grab more blue and see how dark that is. I want to just make sure that ends up blending with that lighter blue. But again, it does not have to blend all the way. This is a fall night, so we're trying to express that it might be windy, so the sky might be kind of swirly around this moon. And therefore, our colors don't have to blend all the way. We can have the streaks of different colors in there. So grab a little bit of that white. As you work your way out, you're going to find that the paint is not going to be as workable where you started. So if you want to blend, you got to blend that now. Otherwise, it's going to dry later on. So I'm adding a little bit more white in there. But you see how it's just kind of like streaky, but doesn't blend all the way, and that's okay. And let's keep going with this blue. We're going to bring this out even further. We're pretty much going to paint the entire canvas at this point, but there is going to be a little bit of a gap on the bottom of the painting where our green land area is going to be. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to introduce Mars Black. Actually, we already have Mars Black on our palette, but we're going to introduce that Mars Black to our palette here. Just a moment. So I'm going to get to the point where I'm almost at the far left edge of the canvas because our sky is going to get very dark very fast here. So maybe bring this out just a little bit and then grab your black. So when you have maybe like 1.5 inches of space over here in the upper left corner area, grab your black. So Mars Black is a very strong black. It will get dark very fast. So just a little bit at a time, and blend that with your Phthalo Blue. So down here we have all this black. When you get to the point where you're blending your black with the blue, you're going to have to paint over that transition zone several times to get that to blend. You just want to be really careful not to bring too much black in where it's supposed to be bright. So closer to where that moon is, we don't want to bring too much black in that area. I'm going to introduce some more Phthalo Blue to my palette. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to continue this area in the lower left right here. A little bit of water just to boost that color. And there is a little bit of black on my brush, and that's okay. So I'm getting a really dark blue at this point because of that black. That's kind of what I wanted to go for, really dark blue, but not pure black over here. And continuing, do you see how my strokes are still going in a circular direction, even though at this point we're pretty much off the circle or off the canvas, but it's still going circular, curved. So at no point do I really switch to flat strokes. It's still curving. Down here we have more of that pure black. And again, I did mention that on the bottom of the canvas, we're going to leave a little bit of a gap because there's going to be kind of a dark green hilly area at the very bottom. It's where we're going to paint our wheat field in a later step, but we don't need this entire bottom to be solid black. We can leave space because there's going to be like a green painted hill area right here. We can bring this down just a little bit. Maybe 1 inch, 1.5 inch gap there on the bottom. I'm going to use the rest of this blue and just kind of bring streaks of that blue in there. Next, I'm going to go back in with my round brush and kind of define this moon a little bit better. So this is the number 4 round brush and pure titanium white. I'm going to paint a bright white circle in the center of that. And if we want to kind of blend that in with the rest, we can. It's not going to, the paint on the canvas right here is not workable, it's dry. But I could take this white, kind of bring it out a little bit more. And then if I want to do a few dry brush marks with the titanium white, take my finger and kind of fill the rest of that circle in. But I can also take this, a little bit of blue into it so it's not super bright white. Just a few kind of dry brush strokes radiating around that circle. Few little moonbeams around that moon. You can just do this around. So that's dry brush. There's not a lot of paint on that. There's not water. It's just dry. And we're going to do splatter stars. So this is the toothbrush that I use to create splatter star effects. And I say this every time I use the toothbrush. You want to test it out first. You don't want too much water. So that first time around I did it, it was too drippy. So I used a towel to just kind of dry it real quick. You don't want it too drippy or too thick. When you get the right consistency of white and a teeny bit of water, you get the fine little speckles for the stars. So with this next step, we don't need to wait for this to dry. It's okay if that black down there is still a little bit wet. We are going to load our dark green color onto our palette, Hooker's Green Hue Permanent. If you don't have this exact green, you can use any dark green for this. And we'll need our 3/4 wash brush. So I'm going to get all that blue and black off of that brush, dry it, and load that into our green. So we are going to paint our ground area next, and just use the tip of the brush. So that's about 1.5 inches from the bottom of the canvas. That does not have to be an exact measurement. but this is the first layer for our simplistic wheat field that we're going to paint. But let's cover all this white and do a solid green over here. So you can see how that green is kind of blending with that black, and that's okay. We can let that happen. And pretty much covering up all of that white canvas. It's all solid green, left and right strokes. It's a little bit of a hilly area. You can see how it kind of curves upwards, and then the rest just kind of curves down. Black, just kind of bringing that down and letting that blend with the rest. So we have our entire canvas filled up at this point, and we can let this first green layer kind of dry a little bit before going on to the next step. The next step is going to be painting the wheat field, and I used light green permanent and raw sienna. Also the dark green. I ended up not using a lot of this dark green for this grassy wheat field area, so that one's kind of optional. And I used a 3/8 inch angle brush for this. The nice thing about this angle brush is that I can use it to create some nice thin grass lines. I'm going to start by mixing our dark green with our lighter green. And I'm going to create a layer of just grass lines towards the back. So right here, I'm not starting on the bottom of the canvas. I'm starting kind of in the middle area, and I'm stroking these upwards to create these kind of medium-sized grass blades. So these ones are kind of a little bit in the distance. So I'm using the tip of the brush and just stroking upwards, creating different angles. You'll get different brightness levels because of that lighter green color. So that's our first layer of grass lines. Let's grab our raw sienna. So without rinsing the brush, I grabbed raw sienna with whatever greens are left on my brush. I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to start at the bottom of the canvas, and I'm going to bring my grass blades up much higher. So we're creating kind of this wheat field color in these lines and simplifying it. We're not trying to make it look super realistic or anything like that, because there's going to be a lot of detail in this scarecrow that we will be painting. So if we can simplify this background, that's helpful. Adding a little bit of white to the brush is really going to brighten up that color, give it that wheat color. I'm going to create some longer pieces on the right. Some of these pieces I'm going to detail and add the little wheat pieces, grain pieces on the ends of them. And over here on the left, I'm actually making these blades just slightly shorter. My scarecrow is going to be over here in this area. So I've made the blades a little bit longer on the right. So I'm just using a combination, that raw sienna, adding a little bit of white in there. There's two blades over here. I'm going to go back over, make them nice and defined. See how those pieces ended up being a little bit longer. So I'm going to use my number 4 round brush, the raw sienna, a little bit of white. I can paint little kernels on these 2 wheat plant lines that I made purposefully bigger and taller. I'm just going to do little curved stroke lines going outwards and going up to create the head of that wheat plant. You can definitely go in much more detail with your wheat field, but again, I left it kind of simple because there's a lot of detail work that's going to go into our scarecrow. You can paint more of these little wheat heads on some of your longer plant lines. Keep in mind, Scarecrow is going to be on the left side, so if you are going to paint more of these, try not to do too many on the left side because you may end up having to paint over that when we do our Scarecrow. We can add maybe a few more plant lines down here at the bottom. And then I'm going to use titanium white to kind of highlight this, give it a little bit more dimension so it's not super flat, but still simplified. So we're going to draw our Scarecrow next. We want to let pretty much everything dry before going on to this step. For the drawing portion, I am using a white chalk pencil. We're going to start in the upper left area to the left of the moon, about where that height of the moon is, and I'm going to draw like a U for the head, and then a little part that's gathered under his head. I'm going to draw kind of a wavy line that's going across for his hat. So there is a traceable for this if you find the drawing portion a little challenging, but it's very simple, shape by shape, line by lines. I'm going to draw the hat, curvy top for the hat. So the part of the Scarecrow head is almost the same size as our bright moon area and still high up. Gave myself enough room for the rest of his body. We can do his arm. So we have one arm that's kind of going diagonally upwards. The edging of his sleeve I'm kind of making a little bit wavy. This part of the sleeve ended up going off the canvas. We're not going to see his straw hand coming out of that sleeve on the left, but if your placement is different, you can also move the placement of his arms if you want, but if your placement is different, you might see that part. So we can do his torso, and it kind of curves inwards and then back out. I find drawing scarecrows to be somewhat more forgiving than drawing actual people because it's a handmade sort of object, and if it's out of proportion, that's okay. So you saw me kind of measure the height. So if we divided our scarecrow in half, the top of his hat to the bottom of his torso is about the same height as his legs. So you can kind of keep that in mind. So I have his legs kind of going outwards, the leg on the left going more vertical, the one on the right kind of going diagonally. We can turn these into overalls, drawing kind of a boxed area. And then a little pocket. These chalk pencils are nice because they do erase on the canvas as long as you're not painting over wet paint, and as long as you don't paint over it, it will erase. We can draw his face. The face we're going to have to paint over when we do the first layer, but it's still nice to kind of draw that face in and make sure we have the placement of that in. And you are welcome to change the design of the face if you want. And draw the little straw that's kind of sticking out, and then finish these coveralls and making those kind of curve. his hair. And other than that, we don't really need to draw any more details. We can definitely go into more detail when we paint him in. But that is the majority of what we need to start painting our Scarecrow in. So I'm going to use a number 4 round brush, and I'm going to start with his head. So for the head, I used raw sienna mixed with titanium white, and you see me mixing that together onto my palette. A little bit of water in there to kind of loosen that up a little bit, but it's about equal parts raw sienna and titanium white. If you want it to be lighter, add a little bit more white to it, darker, add more raw sienna. And we're just painting that in solid. You will have to paint over any facial features that you drew, but that's okay. So you're going to paint under his hat. We have kind of a curved area. This whole part curves downwards. So here at the top, how it's a little bit wavy at the top. Or you can just paint it straight and solid and then paint the hat over that. And then our little gathered piece over here, where his neck is also the same color. And then we can start painting his hat in. So this is raw umber, and we'll use our number 4 round brush. And here at the top, I'm going to paint the hat. So part of that needs to kind of overlap the top part of his head. I did not rinse my brush off, so I still have white and raw sienna on my brush. And so my hat is kind of blending and kind of creating different colors intentionally. That's why I did not rinse the brush off. I'll do this. As I'm painting my Scarecrow in, you're going to notice that I'm not following my chalk drawing exactly, and I do that all the time. You don't need to follow your chalk drawing unless you want to. You can definitely do that, but I made his hat a little bit shorter than the actual drawing. And then the inside part I did with curved kind of strokes going in a horizontal direction, and then I did not over blend it. So you have a different kind of variation of brown already in his hat. Let's start painting his shirt in. He's got a long sleeve red shirt on with a little bit of a plaid texture, and we're going to simplify that plaid texture too. So this is Cad Red Medium Hue. Rinse off my number 4 round brush, kind of squeeze that water out, and let's load that into our red. And then go ahead and start painting his long sleeve in. I'm doing kind of curvy strokes, long curved strokes to fill in that shape of his sleeve. And down here as well. So it's not exactly a rectangle shape, it's got curves on the edges. And then this side as well. This one, we're just going to let this sleeve go off the edge of the canvas. If you have more room, you can not let it go off the edge of the canvas, but we're not going to see the straw coming out of his sleeve on that end. Before this dries, I'm going to do a little bit of texture with this, with titanium white. And I'm just going to do little plus signs kind of all throughout. That gives it just a little bit of fun plaid texture without going into too much tedious detail. If you want to do more detailed plaid texture with this, like with a liner brush, you're welcome to. But this was my way of simplifying this. It does give really pretty texture. So little plus signs with that white kind of all throughout that red area of his sleeve. And then we see part of his shirt over here where his coveralls are covering, but we can still see part of the red shirt right here. So same thing, filling that in solid red, and then we can do our little plaid texture in there, the little plus signs, little pluses. Let's set our 4-round brush to the side and let's load our palette with the color Light Blue Permanent. I'm going to use my angle brush for this so I can get in there and kind of do full width strokes, but also use the side of the brush to get kind of these finer details in there. I'm going to paint the overalls, and the overalls are going to have kind of a darker blue and white in this as well, but for now we're just using the light blue to kind of fill it in first. So I'm using the angle brush to fill in the straps of his overalls and use the tip of it to kind of outline the sides of it to define the shape. I'm going to load some fresh titanium white onto my palette as well. Load my 3/8 inch in that white. So I'm going to let this white kind of blend with this blue before that blue dries all the way. It's going to give some nice color variation in my overalls. Gives it that sort of faded denim look. So I'm reloading my brush in blue and white and letting that blue and white kind of gently blend together. So I'm doing the pant legs. You just using the tip of the brush to kind of do the edging of that shape and then the full width of the brush to fill it in. The edging is kind of wavy and not straight. And his other pant leg. I'm going to grab a little bit of that white, blend that in with my blue before that blue dries all the way to give it that kind of two-toned light blue denim look. Before doing any more details on my overalls, I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to go back and do a little bit of shading in the head area. So rinsing my 3/8 inch off and setting that to the side and grabbing my 4-round. I'm going to grab my raw umber, so that's that dark brown color we used in the hat. I'm going to mix that with my lighter beige color, that raw sienna and titanium white. So I have kind of a medium brown color. So right here on the bottom of his head, I did little curved strokes to kind of create some shading just on the bottom and a little bit over here on the left where that piece kind of gathers in his neck area. Gives me a little bit of shadowing in that area so it's not super flat. So right here, a little bit of darker outline just on the edge. So now we have more kind of darker color in that area. A little bit of more brown down here. Next, I'm going to do some more detail work on the overalls. So let's introduce some Phthalo Blue to our palette and rinse off that number 4 round brush. So we're going to add some darker blue into this, but also paint his pocket. So this is the Phthalo Blue, and I'm going to take this and outline the straps of his coveralls. So this little curve line area, and I'm going to paint his pocket back in with that phthalo, and then I grabbed some white, just kind of let that blend together in a curvy horizontal direction. And then just like with that white, when we did that kind of like faded rustic look, we're going to do that with our blue, but not everywhere. So I'm going to do this kind of on the left side where it'd be a little bit more darker and shadowy on the left side and on the left side of this leg as well. Just a few kind of contouring strokes with that darker blue. So it's not blending with my lighter blue at all because that light blue has dried by now, so it's not workable paint. But I can apply that just kind of dry brush style. Gives it a little bit of dimension and texture in there, and also makes it look a little bit more shadowy on the left side. I'm going to rinse my brush off and load my palette with Cadmium Yellow Medium Hue, and I'm going to start working on the Scarecrow's hair. So this is a clean rinsed number 4 round brush, and I'm just going to start applying a little hair texture on here. I'm going to layer this up with some white and brown into it, so it's not going to be completely solid yellow here. So if you add a little bit of white to your brush and just kind of go over that, it's going to really brighten that yellow up, especially since we're working on a darker background. Little kind of diagonal, uneven strokes. Create that straw hair look on the sides of the hat. We can use a little bit of that brown, so that raw umber dark brown color. Can add a little bit in there that's going to make some darker strands of hair. Helps give that more texture. And if you want to do bangs or a different kind of hairstyle, you're definitely welcome to do that. So we have other places where we can paint the straw texture, including the hands. So same kind of thing with the yellow, the brown, the white. Do little diagonal strokes coming out of his sleeve. And again, if we layer on little bits of white, that really helps to brighten that up. Create some really pretty color variation in the straw. So if your sleeve is still kind of showing on the left, you can do straw on the left arm. Mine is going off the canvas. But we do see straw coming out of the bottom of his pants area. So same thing, the yellow, little diagonal strokes. And then you're adding little bits of white and brown in there as well. A little bit of brown gives it some of that darker color. So we have a nice variety of color. Next, I'm going to switch to a tiny brush. This is a little liner brush for detail work. And I'm going to load my palette with some Mars Black. So I'm going to do the face and starting with the nose. So I found it easiest to start with the nose and then work around after that. So with this little liner brush, I have Cad Red Medium Hue, and I'm just going to paint a triangle right in the center of his face. So there's a little triangle. And then let's rinse the red off of that brush, and let's use our Mars Black to paint the mouth and eye next. A little bit of black. So I'm really kind of twisting this brush here. Make sure that paint is distributed evenly on those bristles, but especially on the tip of that brush. So we're going to do 2 ovals. These ovals are kind of going slanted inwards just a tad. And again, you can change the style of these if you want. Such a tiny detail, so I just did a simplified version of Scarecrow eyes. And then we can do a mouth. So I did 2 little curves for the ends of the mouth, and then a dashed line going in a curved direction for the rest of his mouth. So when the black eyes dry, I'm going to add more white detail to it, but that's going to have to dry before doing that. Then I took my liner brush in the black, did a little bit of outlining kind of on the bottom of the hat, and then on this left side of the hat. And then a few little darker lines in the hair, but I didn't want to have that black take over. Just a few dark straw lines, and then little dashed stitch lines on his pocket, a little bit of outlining on the bottom part of his jeans, a little bit on the straw pieces. So wherever you think there needs just to be like a little pop of outlining, you can. I don't recommend outlining everything. Sometimes it's tempting to do that. And then back to the white, I'm going to do the little buttons on his overall. So 2 little white circles. And then I'm also going to use this brush to paint the little patches on his coveralls. So we can do a little red patch. I did not rinse my brush off, by the way, so this is going to turn into kind of a light red color. And so it's a little square piece. And then if we want to do another one, so I have yellow on my palette, just made an orange. I'm mixing that red into it. It's a little orange patch. And if you want to do more, you are definitely welcome to detail this scarecrow even further. I'm going to rinse that off. And once your eyes are dry, you can take your white. So I'm going to do 2 little curved lines just on the left side of the inner part of the eye. And that's going to make it look like your scarecrow is looking towards the right. And then I took Mars Black. I'm going to do little stitching on the edges of these patches. This is still that little detail liner brush. I'm going to make little dots on his buttons where his coveralls are. So 2 little dots. If you want to do 4, you can do 4. And then I'm going to add some straw inside of his pocket. So with that yellow, the white, you can also use the brown and the black if needed. So little diagonal lines to add that straw detail. Next, I'm going to paint the stick that our scarecrow is attached to. So let's go back to a number 4 round brush because this is a little bit of a thicker line that we need. And I'll use the brown and black. So this area is, well, we can add a little bit of white to that brown. This area is a little bit dark, but we have some lighter straw colors, so it's going to be kind of tricky depending on the placement of your scarecrow and straw. You might need to make this stick go darker, or you might need to make it go lighter in order for it to really show up. So that's kind of like a middle brown, but if I add some white in there, that'll help that to show up a little bit better. And next I'm going to paint a black crow on the scarecrow arm. So this is the number 4 round brush, and we're going to do a very, very basic blackbird, a very cartoon-like blackbird. So let's start with a little kind of oval shape for the body, and then we can kind of drag little diagonal strokes down for his tail. And we can do a little circle for the head that is kind of overlapping that first oval that we did. And I chose to do an orange beak. If you want to do a black beak, you can. So let's mix red and yellow together and we get orange. This is the liner brush, by the way, that little detail brush. I'm going to do a beak that's open. So a little kind of triangle. So there's his open mouth, and then fill those in to create 2 little triangle shapes. And then I'm going to use titanium white to make a little dot for his eye. So rinse that orange off dry and then grab the white. You can also use a toothpick for this step because this is going to be a really tiny dot. I actually turned my brush over and I'm using the handle of the brush to make a white dot. And then I can use a little bit of highlighting. So I'm going to take that white, and this black is not dry, by the way. You can take that white and just kind of paint these curved lines. Maybe we can see kind of the side of his wing, a little bit on his head area, and it kind of blends in with that black. Then I can grab the black and do little legs. We can barely see his legs. So very simple. And next I'm going to take this time to gently erase any of my chalk lines. So if your painting is wet, I don't recommend erasing, but if it seems dry and you feel comfortable with erasing, go ahead and erase gently. That chalk line will lift off very easily as long as it hasn't been painted over. If it's been painted over, you shouldn't see any of those chalk lines still showing through. One of the final details I'm going to do with this painting is add fall leaves in the background that are kind of blowing in the sky in sort of a swirled direction. So I decided to paint all my fall leaves white first and then paint them in with the red and yellow and orange. You don't have to do this. Painting white first does allow them to show up super bright, but if you don't want them to be super bright, if you want them to be kind of dim, it also works if you don't paint them white first, if that makes sense. So I'm using the liner, the tiny detail brush, to paint all these little leaves in. Most of them are the sort of like heart shape, rounded / pointed leaves. You can do different styles of leaves if you want. If you want to do like a maple leaf or an oak leaf, you're certainly welcome to change that up. So you can see how I'm just kind of changing the direction of these leaves to kind of go in that sort of spiral direction that the lines in the sky are going. So this one right here, we can have different points on the leaf, so that's kind of a different style. So when you're done painting the white layer of all your leaves, you'll need to let that white dry, and then you can go back in and paint them in the different colors. So I'm going to use red and yellow and also make orange for some of these leaves. I'm going to use the same brush again, that liner detail brush, and just go back over what I just painted with the white. I am leaving the stem white. If you want to go back and paint the stem brown or black, you're definitely welcome to, but I decided just to leave it white. So I'm using different colors. I can make orange, I can use yellow. Another detail I'm going to do is a little bit of highlight on the right side of the Scarecrow's hat using that detail brush in titanium white. So a little loose outlining over here on the left in the top bottom part of his hat. And a little bit over here on this piece. Just a little pop of brightness. A little bit over here on the right too. We can also add some more stars in the sky. I like to add twinkling stars to my night paintings. It gives it that whimsical effect. But I can use this brush to create that little diamond star. I'm going to start in the middle and you just kind of drag the brush upwards and downwards to create 2 vertical lines and 2 little horizontal lines. So I did 2 little twinkling stars. You can do more if you want. You can also paint little white dots kind of throughout your sky for more stars, but these ones just happen to be brighter. And then the final detail I'm going to do is add a few lines and veins to some of the leaves. I almost did it to all of them, but then I decided it would look maybe a little bit too busy if these leaves were just way too detailed. But I did like a black line down the middle. And then some had little veins, but didn't do it to all of them. There's so many details that you can add to this. I almost added some sunflowers in the background or even a sunflower flower on the Scarecrow's hat. You can really go crazy with this. But that is it. I'm going to leave my painting like this. And this is the conclusion of how to paint Scarecrow at night. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching and thanks for painting with me.